Hey, legends and star pals, it's Lindsey and Sarah here to deliver your April 2025 month ahead astrology forecast. Hey Sarah, how you doing? We are at the tail end here of eclipse season as we're recording this, and we agreed that this was going to be a quick and dirty forecast because we've had to keep postponing it because of the astrology of the end of March. So, yeah, how are you doing, hon?
Yeah, I think I guess the eclipses usually mess with things. We've been experiencing that quite
For
a bit.
years.
Just trying, yeah, just trying to get here together has been an eclipse and perhaps Mercury retrograde cycle related journey. Who knows? It's always for us as astrologers, right? It's always a little awkward to do a forecast for a month that when we haven't even gotten through all of the gnarliness of the current month that we're already in, and we're really experiencing March astrology right now. Um,
IRL.
yeah, so we're gonna try to like put those things on a shelf for just a second and talk about the future. How about you?
Ah, yeah, it's interesting having seventh house eclipses, right? Because it is often about other people, and it is in some ways about like the theme or topic of partnership in my life, and we're wrapping up this Libra Aries series that's been going on for about a year and a half now since the fall of 2023, wrapping it up. Libra and Aries placements rejoice. Aries placements don't rejoice too much because
Yeah,
there's just
cautiously.
there's just more coming down the pipeline. We've got incoming Neptune, incoming Saturn, right? Um, but we are through the stage of Venus and Mercury retrograde in Aries. By the time they go back into Aries in April, we will have them direct. But really, just it's the timing's always amazing to me. I'm always like, it's so real. You start off in one place, you think life's going one way, and then the eclipses happen, and it's like always just a redirect. Like, yep, turns on a dime. Of course, collectively, it's bad. It's a shit show. Uh, ICE is disappearing people with legal status off the streets. Like, it's bad. It's really bad. What else can you really say besides it's really bad? I mean, we could spend hours talking about it, but I just want to
Good.
acknowledge it.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. Yeah, I think the sun does not want to be eclipsed. Number one, the sun in Aries really does not want to be eclipsed.
Hmm.
Number two, and this is the end of this series. So I feel like maybe I shouldn't be surprised that it feels a little out like a lion
Hmm.
in terms of the eclipse cycle. So
Yes, yes. Well, and that just gave me an idea, Sarah, about maybe how to move through this April forecast is to kind of go planet by planet because
mm,
everyone sort of has their own storyline, and it might be easier to just follow if we kind of just say like, okay, what's everyone's storyline for this month of April, and even starting with the sun, right? We are in this solar journey through Aries for most of the month. It is the first month of spring. It's cardinal fire, and the sun is exalted in Aries, right? So this is the sign where the sun gets like extra privilege, but it's been recently eclipsed. So we're kind of dealing with the fallout of that. We talked last month about the eclipse of the sun in Aries, often correlating to the blotting out of a sovereign, a particular person who's a sovereign, or this concept of sovereignty or autonomy. Um, and then the sun moves into Taurus, which is this fixed earth sign for the last third of the month. And yeah, I'm just wondering, are there anything that you associate with the sign of Taurus that people might be thinking about as we change solar seasons, since you're our solar gal?
yeah, the sun gets to rest in a pretty luxurious fashion after its exaltation, or in this case, exaltation and eclipse. Um, and so, yeah, the sun is building momentum to its, favorite and home time and season. So, having come through the Saturnian seasons, it's really excited for getting to kind of lean back and enjoy the spring and watch everybody be happy and kind of do some of that basking that lions do so well. Yeah, I think the
Mm,
the the regal sun is pretty happy in Taurus season. So
yeah, yeah.
we're like what Uranus is in late stage Taurus. We're in late stage Uranus and Taurus. And so it we're still feeling that. I know the sun will illuminate that as always, but yeah, I think in general, Taurus is kind of a fun season for the sun. The nap
It's
after
lovely.
vacation.
I know I'm finding a lot of grounding. I mean, our group chat for the orchard is like blowing up right now because someone this morning saw maybe a like a river otter or
Mhm.
maybe like a muskrat or something. I don't know if we have muskrats in New Mexico. I need to double check that, fact check, but in our pond. And then AJ just saw our turtle, who we've named Maurice, who has been around the last couple of seasons. And so this this springtime return of life for me has been so grounding in a
Mhm.
time of political upheaval and
Yes.
fear and worry and collapse, right? There's also this reminder that like life comes back after these Saturnian events of the foundations kind of being renewed or buildings being raised metaphorically or literally.
Mhm.
So I'm grateful for Aries and Taurus season and the month of April. Yeah, it's good stuff. So I hope that others can find grounding in the natural world.
Yeah. Yeah. That is unfolding with and but a lot without us.
Yeah.
That feels like sun and Taurus to me. Like it's just blooming. You don't have
Yeah.
to do anything.
Yep, exactly. The tulips will come up. And then, speaking of the luminary of the sun, we have the moon. And the moon and the sun, their relationship is not so eclipsy this month. Um,
Yeah.
we have two lunations, and they're in Venusian signs, right? Which is
Yeah.
also kind of a lovely thing about this time of year, as we get the double lunations in the full moon in Libra and the new moon in Taurus. So our full moon is on the 12th in Libra, and our new moon is on the 27th in Taurus. And actually, why don't we take a look at the chart here and just see what we're working with these? So let's take a look here at our full moon chart for April 12th at 23 degrees of Libra. Um, we have a sun.
Anything about that you want to say?
Uh, well, it's very close to my ascendant degree, which, you know, but I'm noticing here a conjunction between the sun and Chiron. That is the first
Yeah.
thing that is popping out to me. And so, um, yeah, for me, this really highlights this Chiron story and the role that Chiron has been playing in this Aries story for the last couple of years, hanging out here with all of the eclipses. It's just added a little bit of extra zest or flavor
Hmm. Hmm.
to what's been going on in Aries. This is the wounded healer, right? So we might expect, even though this is the first lunation in the Libra Aries axis that isn't an eclipse, hallelujah,
Yes.
for a while. It's still spicy, right? I think Chiron is still bringing the spice, and also a very, very close square to Mars,
Yes.
still in Cancer. Mars, please get
Mars,
out of
are you
Cancer.
done? Can you please be done?
We beseech you.
Yeah. And I mean, at this point, it's like a couple of degrees away. So some of us are really feeling the final push, the final labor pangs of getting Mars back into Leo and through this very long epic that we've
Truly,
been following.
truly. We are just at this point in the month, 5 days away from Mars leaving Cancer for good for the next 2 years. So we can really, I think, breathe a bit of
Mm.
a sigh of relief. And yeah, but this is what we call a T square in astrology terms, where you have an opposition, and in this case, it's between the Sun and Chiron in Aries and the Moon in Libra, and they're both forming a square to a third planet, which is Mars in Cancer. And what I've noticed about T squares, and Sarah, I'd be curious if you have your own experiences of them, is that there's sort of a when you have this oppositional energy, it's like a tug of war or a sort of there's a, nothing really gives. But the planet to which they're forming the square is sort of this off-gassing
Mhm.
place where the energy gets like it, it comes out sideways basically. And so I have a feeling that this full moon will really kind of enervate that Mars and Cancer story that we've been dealing with for the last, God, like 8 months now, since Mars originally entered Cancer last September. So, yeah, what do you think about this T square, or is there anything? What else in the chart are you noticing?
Yeah, you covered a lot of it, but I think what I would add is that we'd want the first full moon in Libra post eclipses to be able to be like really luxuriating in like a Venusian full moon. But a few things make that difficult. The Chiron being right there, square to Mars being right there, but also that, Venus is, as ruling over this lunation is retrograde. It's gone back into Pisces at this point. And so even though Venus is in Pisces, it's in this retrograde cycle. I don't know that that necessarily feels fun. It feels juicy in the fun way. I think it
Mm-hmm.
feels, like it's part of that story, kind of like
Mm-hmm.
the Aries eclipse feels really affected by Mars being in the retrograde cycle in Cancer, even though direct. So
Yeah.
yeah, it felt like pain and soreness when I
Mm,
looked at this lunation. Like
mm.
the Chiron and Mars being present here, it just felt like our wounds being kind of messed with or poked at a little bit, and how there won't necessarily be much like soothing energy available is kind of what I felt when I looked at this.
Totally. I mean, this is very similar to the March full moon, which was an eclipse in Virgo, where during that eclipse, that full moon, its ruler Mercury was stationing retrograde. Yeah, it was stationing retrograde. Under this full moon in Libra, the ruler of the moon is Venus, and she is stationing direct on this day.
Yeah,
So
it's stationing. Yeah.
it's an interesting mirror of just these full moons ruled by stationing planets, like the day of. And I think that there's a sort of standstill quality that comes about when a planet is stationing and especially ruling a lunation like this. And when we're looking at the chart, look, I mean, Venus, Saturn, and the North Node and Mercury are all within 4 degrees of one
Yeah,
another.
really tight there.
It's really tight. This is late Pisces. This is an area of the chart that has been seeing, I think, quite a bit of destruction, um, or just like demolition, right? And sometimes demolition, we need to demolish things in order to rebuild them in a way that we want, right? Being someone that has done a lot of remodeling in the last few years, I can appreciate a good demolition. But also, we're seeing a lot of destruction, I think, in these Piscean realms of compassion, right? Of universal kind of equality, and all humans have inherent worth and dignity, right? We are just seeing this get these ideas get kind of pushed aside. I mean, we're literally seeing a campaign against empathy right now.
Truly.
I
Yeah.
never in my life, truly, if you had been like, Lindsay, do you think that people are going to be like, empathy is a sin? And it was going to be this like pop cultural phenomenon. I would have been like, fuck no. What the fuck? Who would ever say that? It's so ludicrous. And yet here we are.
We're also 30 minutes into Neptune and Aries. So
Yes.
Neptune will, April means Neptune is in Aries officially. And so
Yes.
I think we'll be also wrapping our minds around whatever that means, whatever
Mm-hmm.
that looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So this is an interesting moon for sure. And yes, I think soreness is a really great image, like just like been through it, Either you got beat up or you did a really hard workout, right? And
Yeah.
you are feeling it afterward. So I mean, and the common kind of wisdom that I've heard among astrologers about this spring in particular is the springtime is when, particularly March, was when the action happened, right? The thing got initiated that is going to be the story. And of course, we've seen a lot of this. We've seen fucking war plans leaked on WhatsApp. It's just like absurd. People getting disappeared off the streets. You know, there is shit, and I'm sure in your own lives, right? Just shit got initiated. And then the rest of the year, in a way, is just kind of dealing with the fallout. Now,
Mhm.
we have Saturn into Aries in May to keep in mind. We have Jupiter into Cancer in June and Uranus into Gemini in July. So there are going to be some big stories emerging in the late
Mhm.
spring and the early summer. But really, we're just, I think, in kind of dealing with a lot of fallout mode starting now. Yeah. So that's what this chart looks like to me as well, Sarah. Let's talk about the new moon in Taurus, April 27th, 7 degrees of Taurus. Looking, the first thing we can do here is look toward the ruler of the lunation, who is Venus, and she's at 28 degrees of Pisces. She's exalted, right? We have to keep that in mind too for the Libra full moon. Venus is exalted, but, and there's a big but, and I feel like the theme of this month is like
Yeah.
contingencies.
Yes. Yeah. Lots of asterisks for
Yeah.
April.
Yeah, like, oh, it could be, or that could be, but that also this.
Mhm.
She's exalted in Pisces and still conjunct Saturn. So we have this month
Mhm.
of Venus conjunct Saturn. And so this, stopping, slowing down, um, death of, demolition of connection, love, relationship, art, pleasure, marginal gender identities, right? Things like this, I think, are going to be really thematic with this conjunction to Saturn. So the image that I've been thinking of with Venus exalted conjunct Saturn and all this mess in Pisces is like a regal going back to her demolished land and kind of taking it all in and also coming up with some new dreams about the future.
Kind of like the images and videos we've seen of people returning to their homes in Palestine. Like
Oh
this is
God.
right where they want to be. This is the place they want to be. They're smiling as they're surveying all of the destruction because they have a dream of something that we can't see and is not
Mm,
realized yet. And
mm,
so it messes with me seeing people like just dreaming again and like are already having the narrative sort of inside of them about like this will be destroyed and then we will rebuild it.
that gave me the chills. Thank you for bringing it into a real life image. Yeah. Um, yeah. Going home to your fucking bombed out house
Yeah.
and
And
figuring
kind
out
of,
how to pick up the pieces, even though it's still under
yeah,
threat. It's still under threat.
that's right. That's right. In the kind of way that somebody who loves their home so much and dreams of their home so much, the way that person can dream in a way that to an outsider is like, what are you? I mean, that's really hard for me to wrap my mind around.
Mm,
But it's a relationship with a certain place as home that it
mm.
can be hard for people to understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's this
Whew.
new moon is also like Mars, Pluto are like really right there in their opposition. So we've been
Yeah,
watching
we're in a
Mars
different
from
T
the
square.
yeah, exactly. Mars having gone through this huge retrograde cycle and now here in Leo, what we dreamed of when we talked about the new moon. Here Mars is in Leo again, is direct again, but has to do that final third opposition in the series from the retrograde cycle as Mars has been moving backwards and forwards to our eyes. While Pluto here in Aquarius continues to do its like slow, hellacious trudge forward. Mars coming here to meet them again.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
and that's at 3 and 4 degrees of the fixed signs. And so they're at 7 degrees of Taurus is like, yeah, pretty T squarey.
Very.
Feeling yeah, the energy of pulling the energy of that opposition, which that's just like a very malefic, straightforwardly malefic feeling opposition. So with the full
It's
moon,
bad.
it's the luminaries making the opposition. Here, it's just straight up Mars and Pluto making the opposition, and the luminaries are doing the thing in the middle, the energy in the middle.
Yes. Very interesting, right? Because this is the third and final opposition between Mars and Pluto of this retrograde cycle. Now, the first two, and I think this timing is so funny because we really didn't even plan for it, but that first opposition was when we were doing our exorcism series.
Yes.
It was at the end of October, beginning of November last year. It was like around Halloween and the election. I think it was the weekend before the election was when it went exact. So, I think that that has some pretty obvious delineations, right? That we had this, yeah, the sort of like rooting out of evil or like exposure of evil, that you might say is like exorcism or related to exorcism goes under that umbrella. And then we had this election, which I mean, I've heard sound bites that I don't even know. I'm just like, what? Like that it was fixed, that the election was. I mean, I don't even know like what's going on with this. And then the second one was over the new year. It was like
Yeah.
right around like January
The
3rd or
third.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we can track politically, but we can also track in our own lives what was going on with these oppositions, right? Like what was really coming up, what was being unearthed, what was being excised, right? Or what became, what did you become aware of that sort of needed an exorcism in your own life? And this is like third and final. This is the third act of a three-act play here between these two planets. And so there is something about like we've had all this shit go down. Mars, Pluto, here it is again, coming up again in sharp relief, and it has something to do with this new moon in Taurus. And Taurus, I think, has been a place of the people. It's this place of rootedness and radicality, right? Like the word radical means root. And Uranus is here a co-present. And so what I really see here too is a sort of fomentation of the people
Mhm.
in this chart, and a sort of like a grief but also a hope and a dream and a plan, like we have to respond, and we have to have this new quality about us, like the new moon, it initiates
Yeah.
something new. We have to learn how to be a people, how to be a collective in a new way. When I did the astrology podcast episode on Saturn and music, when Saturn was going through Taurus, back in the early 70s, we got a lot of music that was about the people, that was
Oh
about
yeah.
everyday people, common people, a lot of like CCR. I think Sly and the Family Stone, Everyday
Mhm.
People came out or was on the billboard around that time. And just a lot of messages about solidarity. And so I think, we think of Taurus as being this sign of like pleasure, and it is, but it's like also simple pleasures which are enjoyed by everyone, right? Bread and roses,
Yes.
bread and
Yes.
roses. So it's like it's an ugly chart and it's a hopeful chart, I think, at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love the way you're highlighting all the ways that it is a new moon. So it is a starting of some, it's an invitation for a starting of something or a recentering of something, or like the seedlings, maybe,
Hmm.
since it's Taurus. Like it's more of like a seed planting time.
Um, it's a really lovely image. Thank you for that. Wow.
Wow, wow,
Well,
wow.
those are our lunations. Mercury stations direct from their retrograde cycle on April 7th. Yay! That direct station is at, let's see, 26 degrees of Pisces. So all in this mix here with Venus and Saturn and the North Node. Um, and also still in the sign of its fall, Mercury in Pisces, right? So this is
Mhm.
interesting. I mean, I think to me, one of the biggest stories of this retrograde cycle has been the leak,
Yeah, for
the
sure.
the group chat, the unhinged group chat war plans. I mean, the leak in and of itself is crazy, and then also just the fact that that they're planning more, devastation. I don't know. It to me it sort of is like it really makes sense with Mercury going retrograde in the sign of Aries, where violent strategies might emerge, right? And then into Pisces in the sign of its fall, where like a leak, right? Like
Yeah.
think, what's a water sign? A leak is a water word where a leak might occur. So, um, yeah, that was to me a huge example. I don't, are there any other events that you were like correlating to the Mercury retrograde in the news or in your own life, Sarah?
Um, well, I've just been the I've been the beneficiary of a leak as well, in my own professional life. So I'm sort of metabolizing that. But yeah, like
Mm-hmm.
bad news feels like a theme right now, actually, just like more updates in various things in our like global, national, but also personal lives, just like the trickling. I like our water imagery here, like the leaking and trickling in of kind of more bad news to add to the pile.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll spend April uh yeah, having turned direct and then kind of leaving this saga towards the end of the month where it started.
Soggy saga.
The soggy time. But yeah, I like the reminder. It's not where Mercury wants to be. I just keep thinking about both Venus and Mercury and that Pisces Aries is just a particular place to do a retrograde. It's the end and the beginning. You've done a lot of writing about this, but it's like the big end and the big beginning in terms of
Hmm.
our zodiac, in terms of like our solar world, like just all of that. And so it feels like a big place to go back. It's like to me, going back into Pisces from Aries is like really going back. It's like going back to the end of something and really emerging fresh to the beginning. So it'll be
Hmm.
interesting to see what these leaks expose, maybe in terms of our communication and how we want to communicate and help us, particularly in the Mercury case, like forge some new paths for how we want to be communicating.
Completely. Yeah. And just thinking about how this year in particular is such a big ending, big beginning year. It's consequential, right? Like, I think we will look back to 2025 in a way that was like, oof, that was when everything went down. And so Mercury kind of coming back through, crossing this boundary at the end of the zodiac into the beginning is something of an affirmation of like, yep, yep,
Yeah.
you're starting with some new stuff, and the
Yeah.
old world is in the past now. So yeah, get ready to have some new things to deal with here. And I think, both positive and not so positive, challenging. I can see that in my own life, right? Like I am in some areas of my life really fucking starting over in ways I wish I didn't have to, and in ways that have been really hard and really devastating. And I'm kind of excited about it. I'm getting to the point where I'm kind of like, oh, like the flowers are coming up, right? Like it looked like barren soil, but things are emerging. Things are coming forth here. So yeah, I'm grateful for that. All right, why don't we talk about Venus then?
Okay.
Um, if we're just going in order here. So we also have a Venus direct station on the 12th of April. So again, the same day as that full moon in Libra, she stations direct at 24 degrees of Pisces. So still really we're in this Venus Mercury lockstep. They've really been traveling together throughout both of their retrograde cycles, which has been really interesting and kind of special. I know for me on a personal level, I've been thinking so much about how do I think? What is my cognition around love, topics of love
Hmm.
and connection. And how do I want to approach those things both in my romantic life, in my platonic life, right? My friendships, and also how do I want to be in community? How do I want to function politically? Um, yeah, that's how that kind of grouping pairing has been showing up for me. Have those themes been coming up for you as well, Sarah?
My word for the year is cleave. So
Mm,
I'm thinking a lot about how what would be the point of communication outside of relationships? Like what I don't even I'm so relationally oriented as a person
mm,
that for me almost everything mercurial ends up being about relationships. And so there's a part of the lockstep of Mercury and Venus and the going back together and the coming forward together across the great divide of Pisces Aries. If it just feels right to me, like yeah, those things do go together. They are hand in hand, those parts of our lives. And
mm.
I'm in a reinvention of my own as I prepare to launch my offspring into the world, and they're preparing to graduate from high school, the American, marker of this kind of differentiation process that we do. And
Yeah.
so yeah, everything is in revision for me around that. And yeah, how do I communicate around it in a way that is supportive and also get my boo-hoos in private where I need to and not make his growth and differentiation about myself. So yeah.
Oh, you're such a good mom. And I did literally have this image of you stuffing your son like into a cannon and just be like,
Yes, go. That's my Aries. My Aries moon as a
zoom.
parent is like, let's get you going. Meanwhile, I'll be crying.
So, um, yeah, as she's going direct, right? Again, conjunct Saturn, this long
Conjunct Saturn.
extended
Yes.
conjunction with Saturn, which may feel like, you know, things being kind of slow, kind of on pause, or kind of languishing in an ending, right? In a way, as you've just described, sending your only child off to college, right? Where it's like, I think it will be this time period of mourning,
Yeah.
as well as dreaming of what's coming next, and really assessing what happened during this 6 week retrograde cycle, right? What happened as Venus transitioned from evening star phase to morning star phase, right?
Something too about like loosely conjunct the north node too, right? Like I wonder if that languishing will feel bottomless to us.
Mm,
I wonder if our longing will feel especially potent with
mm.
that proximity to the north node. I hadn't really thought about that, but I wonder.
Yeah. Well,
Distinction and be conjunct the north node feels like a lot to me.
despair, I think, is a word that comes up for me when you bring that up. Despair. And yeah, if Saturn weren't in the mix and it was just Venus North Node, that would probably be just amazing, right? Almost frenetically loving and pleasurable. But Saturn brings down the vibe a bit. I have a friend who is a community organizer, just an amazing person who I really trust. And I think he once said to me that community is the opposite of despair.
Mhm.
And I really love that idea. And that feels like a really good reminder with Venus, Saturn, the North Node here. Like if you are feeling despair, you are probably also feeling alone or lonely. And how can you get that need met for connection and community? It feels a lot different to grieve and mourn with others. I feel like the despair often goes away. Like despair is this kind of quality of loneliness, I think. And so being sad, being worried, but being in a group where there's more resources to actually do something about the situation, right, is lovely. So maybe during this station, if you are feeling that despair, see who you can connect with, right? And try to step outside of that, because despair can really be a vacuous pit.
Yeah, we've talked about Venus Saturn aspects with the funereal images, right? We talked about like the
Yes.
most beautiful flowers at a funeral. And you just mentioned grief, and I just thought, I wonder if a lot of grief will be at the surface. And sometimes you find out something about who your friends are, who your beloveds are, and how people show up for you when you're grieving, and how you
Hmm.
show up for other people when they're grieving. So I really appreciate this, like your invitation to sort of um, check up about how you're in community, because everybody's likely to be feeling some kind of mournful state around this time.
Yeah. Well, and also to mention, right, the exact conjunctions between Venus and Saturn are on April 7th, so 5 days before she goes direct, and then April 24th, about 2 weeks after she goes direct. So, um, the last time that we had the conjunction when Venus was going moving through Pisces preparing to go retrograde in Aries was on January 18th, which was very close to the inauguration, and may have marked some sort of personal event for you as well. That this period of April may really kind of refer back to grieving, maybe something that transpired in January, in like mid January. So something to think about in terms of pattern recognition here, and all of this work that I've been doing around nonviolent communication method and learning about needs, right? Grief is a need. It's what we need to do when we recognize that we have a need that can't be met by something. We grieve. So there, I think that may be helpful too to keep in mind around this time is like if you realize like, oh, I had this need that couldn't be met and can't be met, what now? Like grieve. That's the answer.
Yeah,
Grieve.
yeah.
That's how we process that.
That's the second callback to January. It just makes me think about like the Mars Pluto November election, January inauguration, April, what's happening in April. And now also we're talking about this with the Venus Saturn aspects. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Yeah,
something about the alignment there. Feels like such a callback to a really scary time of unknown. Now we're sort of finding out what all the gateway of the inauguration was. It'll just be interesting to see what April shows us about that.
totally. And we have a third callback to January too with Venus. She forms a trine to Mars early in the month on April 6th while she's still retrograde. And she had been trine to Mars when Mars was retrograde on January 25th. So that's another callback to January that we have this month. So that's really interesting because late March was a lot of callbacks to early February, and then
Mhm.
April is a lot of callbacks to like mid late January. So, yeah, always interesting, as you get more advanced in your own astrology practice to look at if there was if you're looking at an aspect to check when was the last time it happened, and is there a through line, a narrative that connects those dates, because there often is. It's often very loud, actually. All right, that's Venus. Let's talk about our guy Mars. I mean, we gave him an honorable mention that this month he finally fucking leaves Cancer. Like, I bet you're so ready for this extended Mars return to be over.
It's funny, I didn't even realize when my Mars return exact degree happened. I had started taking liquid iron again after I my hit failed my hematocrit test, trying to give blood on the first day I could again. And I went back to hot yoga, and I just thought, yeah, that makes sense. I'm like sweating and pouring liquid iron into my body as my natal Mars in Cancer goes exact again through this process that
That
Mars
is
has been on.
incredible.
Isn't that funny? I didn't
That's
even really realize all the
incredible.
alignment. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Well, and I think big relief, especially too for Leo risings who have been dealing with this shit in their 12th house. Like, God, let's have it be over for y'all. You could
Yeah.
use a little break on the mental health bullshit that I'm sure has arisen around this. So, um, yeah, time for Mars to go back into Leo, and um, let's see. I think it doesn't probably hit. When does it hit its stationary degree? Out gets out of its shadow.
That's in May, right?
Maybe early May. Yeah. Yep, like
Yeah.
May 1st. So we are wrapping up the Mars retrograde story in April. By the time April's over, Mars retrograde story scene. Like we're wrap it up, okay? It's been-
Yes, it's journal entry time here in April for those who have been tracking their Mars retrograde story.
So we talked about the Mars Pluto opposition, third of three, that is happening toward the end of the month. What's that? April 26th is when that goes exact.
Mhm.
We don't have to rehash that because I don't want to think about it anymore, quite frankly. Um, and but early in the month, on April 4th, we have a Mars trine Saturn. And the last time we had the Mars trine Saturn was on February 9th when Mars was retrograde. And so April 4th and February 9th are linked by that trine. So could be food for thought. But I just remember when we were talking about in February, these feelings of
Mhm.
being swamped. And what did you say was the tactic that the administration, what they had called it?
Flood the zone.
Flood the zone. Flood the zone. So, we may have some callbacks to that early in the month, April 4th. Let's see, any other big Mars news? I think that's enough.
I think it is enough as well.
That's enough. We're done talking about you, Mars. Who's next? Jupiter. Not a lot of big Jupiter news this month, right? Still just chilling in Gemini, getting ready to move
Chilling,
into.
quote unquote, chilling in Gemini. That's
There's not
hilarious.
no planet is chill in Gemini.
No,
Let's just be clear.
especially Jupiter though, right?
Especially
So
the planet in exile there.
yeah, yeah,
That's
I
so
really do
funny.
look forward to um, what the summer might look like when Jupiter goes into Cancer. So yeah, we're just kind of here waiting for that at this point, I think.
Um, and then Saturn, right? This is the last full month of Saturn and Pisces, because Saturn will move into Aries in May. Whoa.
Whoa, just letting
Oh.
that sink in a little bit here.
Yeah. So maybe it's a good time to reflect on what has the Mars in, or sorry, this Mars is like, you told me to fuck off.
Exactly. I'm here.
Watch
I'm
me
here. I'm
now.
here.
Like a dog, like,
I'm
hey, you
here and
need
I'm
me?
direct.
Um, what has the Saturn and Pisces story been for you? And I'm curious, Sarah, if you have any reflections on Saturn and Pisces, if that has meant anything in particular for you in your chart personally.
Um, Pisces is my eighth house. One of the things that it has looked like for me is maybe not I was gonna say a chilling, but I mean that as like when you put like a drink in the refrigerator, not
Mm,
like ice, but like just calming, maybe a little threshing. This is a Saturnian word that I often use. A little calming, cooling, or threshing of the way that I share resources with a lot of people. So it's been a little bit of a culling of like, okay, we're not just like sharing everything in common. I'm in multiple partnerships of different kinds, radically sharing my life and resources with more than one person. And it's been a time of saying, like, okay, let's get some clarity here about money. Let's get some clarity here about time. Let's get some clarity here about energy and how we're going to share it. I think that's what's emerged as a really important theme for Saturn going
mm,
through my eighth.
hmm. That's a cool reflection. I can just knowing you can really see how that has tracked over the last couple of years because Saturn has been in Pisces since March of 2023. So just to put a reference point for people, right? When did that shift?
What
For
about you?
me, yeah, for me, it's been in my sixth house, which is associated with illness and sort of routines. I think of the sixth as being this place of like where you try to slow the bleed of the resources that are leaving your life, right? So you implement routines to try to keep your resources in, right? But we're all kind of the life force kind of is leaking, slow leak throughout our whole lives until we die, right? That's kind of how it works. But um, and it's also the sixth house is a place of labor. And so maybe kind of uh, labor that maybe doesn't get a ton of reward or recognition. And so I think since spring of 2023, that my relationship to my health and body has changed quite a bit.
Mhm.
I've been moving into, I also had my Saturn square, my opening Saturn square during this time, which is the first kind of major um, Saturn moment in the life after the Saturn return. So it comes about 7, 8 years after the Saturn return. So I've been in that really coming to terms with my own aging and what I need to be doing in terms of slowing down my aging, not because aging is bad or wrong, but because I would like to have some longevity and some vitality. So things like lifting weights and, you know, stopping eating some foods that don't really serve my health and things like that. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
been and being a lot more aware of the way that I'm spending my time and what I'm
Mhm.
investing my time in, because it has become very apparent to me in the last couple of years that it is finite. It's YOLO.
Yeah.
It's been this opening Saturn square is a real YOLO moment, I think. So um, that's been a big one. And also, the sixth house is associated with pets. And the two dogs that AJ and I rescued in 2016 have moved into elder dog
Mhm.
uh, uh, life. They're gray. Um, and our youngest dog needed two knee surgeries
Yeah.
in the last few years. And so, yeah, it has also been a time of pet related stuff and will continue to be, because Saturn will now move into AJ's sixth house since he has Scorpio rising. I have Libra rising. So I'm sure that the pet stuff is going to continue. We may have some loss in the next few years. And yeah, so that feels all very Saturnian to me.
It
So
does. It really
yes.
does.
Yeah. So, but I'm grateful really for what Saturn has shown me and taught me and helped form some discipline for me in the sixth house. So, um, yeah, and having a day chart means that Saturn is a little gentler on me than Mars, my frenemy Mars. That's going to be the title of my astrological memoir someday. My
We should do one of
frenemy
those.
Mars.
We should do one of those books where you turn it upside down and then it's a different book that you read, and mine will be My Frenemy Saturn. Because yeah, we've talked about this, our exalted malefic out of sect, right? And like what does
That's
that mean for
right.
us?
That's right. It's funny when you realize that maybe your friendship with someone is based on something like that or really inspired by something like that. Like I noticed the other day, a couple of my friends who are really close, they both have fallen planets in the first. And I was like, you two get each other because you have
Mhm.
fallen planets in the first house. And I'm like, that might also be one of the reasons we get each other is we have exalted malefics contrary to sect.
Yes.
So good. Um, Okay. So I think last but not least, Neptune, right? We have
Yeah.
Neptune in Aries. And so many people have done so many
Yeah.
amazing workshops, webinars around Neptune and Aries. I don't really even feel like rehashing it because it's a little scary and exhausting. Um, so go check folks' stuff out. I mean, I'm sure Chris Brennan has done stuff. Adam Ellenboss, I know, did a workshop. I think that's like a seminar that's available online. I don't know. Have you seen anyone else who's done?
Mm, no, Chris
Um,
would be my recommendation.
yeah, it's free, I'm sure. And so, yeah. Um, but what I will say is that April 25th is the first time that the moon conjoins Neptune in Aries. And what we have noticed over our years of doing this is that when the moon lands on something, it activates it. And so we might be like, oh, Neptune's in Aries, but on April 25th, it might really be like, oh, Neptune is in Aries. Sarah, I mean, we've talked about some spiritual themes for this month. One being the opposite of despair is community, right? I'm wondering if there's some other kind of spiritual themes or spiritual uh, practices that you think we might call on for this time, or anything from the tradition that's coming up for you as we consider all of this astrology for April.
The thing that just came to my mind was planets emerging from these retrograde cycles and how, like, we come through a transformational process. We have usually a signature of that. So, like in our shared religious tradition, we have a lot of stories about like uh, Jacob wrestling with an angel and then having an injury that he carries forward from that, or like
Uh,
Jesus enduring crucifixion, resurrecting, but still having the wounds of that crucifixion. And so I think maybe an invitation of April is like, how do you walk wounded
mm,
and like and guard your wound, but not live out of your wound.
mm,
This is that Chiron invitation also too. Like, how do
beautiful.
you want to carry your wound in a way that can be of benefit to you and to others without having to live directly out of it? So, can you limp and still do the work that you're called to do in the world? Can you have an ouchie and still kind of show up and do the thing? That
Mm.
feels like, with all these planets emerging from their retrogrades, that feels like a really big invitation because there's some big new stuff that's launching, and we're just going to be kind of walking wounded through it, I think.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. What a beautiful like invitation for the month of Holy Week and Easter, right? Easter's on the 20th um and actually you're reminding me of one of the most impactful sermons I ever heard, which was while I was in seminary. Reverend Dr. Barbara Lundblad. I'm not sure if you know of her, but she was the first out lesbian to be ordained in the Lutheran tradition. And of course, she teaches on homiletics, and is why she delivered a sermon that I will remember for the rest of my life. But it was an Easter sermon, and the title is "All Fixed Up," and this idea that there's a profoundly intentional theological implication of Jesus coming back from the dead with the wounds still
Yeah.
intact. His body is not all fixed up. And Dr. Lundblad's message was, we don't have to be all fixed up either to be alive, to be, working for and acting in love, and to be moving through the world in powerful, meaningful ways. And God, I must have heard that sermon over. It's been over 10 years probably, and it's still really stuck with me. So I love that. Thank you for bringing that concept of the walking wounded.
Yeah.
Um, of we don't have to be all fixed up to continue to live and to come back from all the things that we've seen, right? Like the trauma is real, and you're no less human because you have wounds.
Yeah, in fact, you're more, right? It's very
Mm,
suspicious for somebody to like present a lot of wisdom without having gone through much of anything, or not exposing how they got there through some kind of struggle. I'm not here to glorify suffering, but it's very suspicious to me when someone wants to
mhm.
talk about things like healing and goodness and being a force for good in the world without being willing to talk about wound and trauma and suffering as a part of life. It is part of what it means to be human in this world.
Wow. And what an interesting application to fascism and the rise of these ideas of purity, right? And that you can somehow purify life from certain types of people. Um, and that there's this concept that like the most exemplified sort of life or society is one that has no perceived woundedness or something like that. So really one, it challenges like who are the people who are seen as like society's like wounds or something like that, and is that really
Yes.
true?
Yes.
And then also, is the purified life really a life at all? Is it a facade?
Mm.
Which you just pointed out. So when we have leaders, who are like, oh, we're gonna like expunge the earth from these types of people because they're just, undesirable or whatever. It's kind of like, are you really being honest about the nature of life itself right now? I don't think you are.
Yeah, that's a really important image. So many nets for social service and social safety are being defunded right now in ways that will lead to what feels like eugenics to me. It feels like a very short step to eugenics to me in the way that those things are being removed. So, what a powerful
Completely.
time to think about wound, and also like separately to think about disability, and like what is our theology of disability? What do we believe about all the kinds of bodies that make up our community, and
Ugh.
how we make a place for those bodies in life with each other in our common life.
Disabled bodies, aging bodies, right? Neurodivergent bodies, like all, trans bodies, queer bodies, children's bodies, women's bodies. I
Yeah.
mean, it's everyone's bodies. This is such a powerful time, I think Aries into Taurus too, to remember like
Yeah,
we are
exactly.
bodies, right? Taurus
Yeah.
is the place where the moon, which in astrology is the body, represents the body, right? Is exalted. It's
Yes.
exalted. And it says like we are bodies though. And our faith is an embodied faith. And our world is an embodied world. So, what does it mean when the powers that be are usurping all of the resources that are made explicitly for bodies and for bodies to have a chance at a meaningful, beautiful life here? Um, God, it pisses me off. But that's good, right? The anger is a message, and a pathway for transformation.
April.
April for this time, Sarah, and yeah, thanks all for tuning in. We will be back, God willing, for our May month ahead forecast. Sarah, anything that you want to share? Anything that you're excited about for April?
No, I was thinking that's the best answer.
No.
What about you, Lindsay? What would you like to highlight that you have
I am
coming?
actually very excited, and I think there is still time to register if you're watching this early. I am presenting at LA Astro Fest at the end of April. This is a new conference that is being put on by Vivi Henriette, and I am just like so excited. I'm going to be presenting on the astrological applications of nonviolent communication methods. So
Awesome.
really stoked about that. The whole conference is really it's meant for beginners. It's meant for newbies to astrology. So if you're like, I don't know if I'm advanced enough to go, if you're in the area or would even want to fly in, go. It's
Yeah.
meant for you. And also it's going to be great for people who are well into astrology as well. So super inclusive event. I'm really excited about it. I'm going to be road tripping out there with Sam Reynolds.
Oh my
And then we're
gosh.
going to come back with Jonah Emerson Bell. And these guys are like my brothers. And I am just so excited. I think it's going to be a fucking hoot and a very sweet reward for the punishing time of the last 6 months. So um,
Lovely.
I'm into it. Yes. Yes. So check us out. And yeah, that's it for me. So, all righty. Well, signing off. See you soon. Thanks again, Sarah.
You too.